I stared at my phone, a wave of disbelief washing over me. My mother's name still glowed on the screen. She'd invited me to dinner at their house. It felt surreal. Months had passed since our last conversation, years since I'd actually visited. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 32. I've always felt like the outcast in my family, or at least that's how they've made me feel. Growing up, I was perpetually in the shadow of my younger sister, Serafina. She was the golden child, seemingly incapable of doing wrong. Serafina was prettier, more charismatic, and possessed an uncanny ability to charm everyone, especially our parents. It wasn't overt cruelty, but their preference for her was undeniable. They'd miss my dance recitals due to being too busy, yet magically find time for Serafina's. My average grades earned lectures, while Serafina's similar efforts were met with praise for doing her best. I sighed, placing my phone on the cool marble counter of my kitchen, a small luxury in the apartment I'd never bothered to tell them about. Why this sudden invitation? What did they want? Fine, I muttered to myself, a reluctant acceptance settling in. I'll go. A week later, I found myself driving up to my parents' modest suburban home. I'd intentionally dressed down, jeans, a simple blouse, minimal jewelry. Nothing that hinted at my actual success, the success they knew nothing about. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. My father opened the door. "Eleanor, come in, come in." His welcome seemed genuine yet distracted. Stepping into the living room, the reason for his distraction became immediately clear. Serafina held court on the couch, my parents' undivided attention fixed on her as she animatedly recounted some workplace drama. She paused mid-sentence, her perfect smile unwavering as she noticed me. "Oh, look who it is." "The prodigal daughter returns," she said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness I'd grown to despise. My mother jumped up. "Eleanor, honey, we're so glad you could make it." She gave me a brief hug, then promptly returned to her spot beside Serafina. I settled into an armchair across from them, observing as Serafina's eyes scanned my outfit with thinly veiled contempt. "Love the thrift store chic look," she commented, smirking. "Thanks," I replied evenly. Not all of us need designer labels to feel good about ourselves. My father cleared his throat. "So, Eleanor, your mother's made a lovely dinner. It should be ready in about 20 minutes. We engaged in awkward small talk until my mother announced that dinner was served. We gathered around the dining table, the same one from my childhood. My father poured wine for everyone. Serafina immediately launched into stories about her job at a marketing firm. "They practically begged me to take on the Harrison account," she declared. "Said I was the only one who could handle it." "That's wonderful, sweetie," my mother beamed, reaching over to pat Serafina's hand. My father turned to me, almost as an afterthought. "And what about you, Eleanor? Still at that same company?" "What was it, assistant manager?" I took a sip of wine before answering. "Still at Sterling Financial, yes." Serafina snorted. "God, Eleanor, you've been there, what, 8 years now? Most people would have moved up by your age. I mean, I've been promoted 3 times in 4 years. I could feel my jaw clenching. If they only knew. I'd been Sterling's financial director for the past 3 years. My annual bonus alone was more than Serafina's yearly salary. I'd been featured in Business Today's 40 Under 40 last year, but they didn't know because they'd never asked, never cared enough to stay updated on my life. Instead of correcting her, I simply smiled. "Not everyone has your drive, Serafina. Or your talent," my mother added, serving Serafina an extra helping of mashed potatoes. The conversation continued in this vein throughout dinner. Serafina bragged about her impressive salary, her envious coworkers, and her upcoming trip to Maui. My parents lapped it up, showering her with praise and follow-up questions. Not once did they ask anything meaningful about my life. "I've been saving for Maui for months," Serafina was saying. "But when you make good money, it's not that hard." She shot me a smug look. "That sounds wonderful," I said, pushing my plate away. "But I should probably get going. Early meeting tomorrow." "Thanks for dinner, Mom." I stood, gathering my purse. My mother walked me to the door, while Serafina and my father remained at the table. "It was good to see you, honey," she said, patting my shoulder. As I drove back to my downtown apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that there had been some ulterior motive for this dinner invitation. Whatever it was, I was relieved to be heading home. Back in my spacious apartment, I kicked off my shoes and poured myself a proper glass of wine, not the cheap stuff my parents served. Just as I settled onto my balcony, overlooking the glittering city skyline, my phone pinged. A message from Serafina. Hope you're not too down about your sad little life, sis. Not everyone can be successful, I guess. Don't worry, though. I'll send you a postcard from Maui. I stared at the message for a long moment, then burst out laughing. If she only knew. I closed the message without responding and took another sip of my wine, gazing at the twinkling city lights from my 28th floor luxury apartment. I didn't always have this strained relationship with my family. When I was very young, before Serafina was born, things were different. I have faint memories of my father tossing me in the air, my mother reading bedtime stories, but everything changed when Serafina arrived. When I was 4, she was the perfect baby, rarely cried, always smiling, with these big blue eyes that seemed to enchant everyone. By the time I was 10, the pattern was clear. Serafina was special, and I was just there. I tried everything to win their approval. I joined every club, studied until midnight, and volunteered on weekends. In high school, I was valedictorian, debate team captain, and yearbook editor. But when I gave my graduation speech, scanning the audience for my parents' proud faces, their seats were empty. They had taken Serafina to her dance competition instead. That day, something broke inside me. I realized nothing I did would ever be enough. So, I stopped trying to impress them and started living for myself. I got a full scholarship to Stanford, graduated with honors, and landed a job at Sterling Financial. Within 5 years, I was managing my own team. 3 years ago, I was promoted to financial director. And I never told them any of it. My phone ringing startled me from these memories. It was my mother again. I hesitated before answering. Hello? We're having a family gathering next Saturday. Everyone will be there, Aunt Clara, Uncle Ben, your cousins. We'd like you to come. Her voice was deliberately vague. I frowned. What's the occasion? Oh, just a family meeting. There's something special to announce. I should have said no. Every instinct told me to stay away. But curiosity got the better of me. Fine. What time? 4 o'clock. And Eleanor tried to dress appropriately. She hung up appropriately, as if I normally showed up in rags. Saturday arrived, and I stood in my walk-in closet, deliberating. I finally chose a simple black dress Chanel, though you'd only know if you recognized the subtle stitching and fabric quality. To the untrained eye, it looked modest, but it cost more than Serafina's monthly salary. When I arrived at my parents' house, cars lined the driveway. I recognized Aunt Clara's sedan and Uncle Ben's truck. Taking a deep breath, I headed inside. Eleanor, Aunt Clara exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. It's been years. Look at you, all grown up and so sensible looking. I forced a smile. Good to see you too, Aunt Clara. For the next 15 minutes, I made small talk with relatives I barely remembered, all while watching my parents and Serafina huddled in a corner, whispering and occasionally glancing my way. Whatever this announcement was, they were clearly excited about it. My mother finally called everyone to the dining table, which had been extended to accommodate the 15 or so family members present. Once we were all seated with plates of food, she stood and tapped her glass with a spoon. We've gathered you all here today for a special reason, she began, beaming. Serafina has some wonderful news to share. Serafina stood, clearing her throat dramatically. 2 weeks ago, she announced, her voice dripping with satisfaction, I bought my own apartment in Crestwood Heights. The room erupted in applause. Crestwood Heights was indeed one of the nicer areas in town, though far from the most prestigious. It's a gorgeous 2-bedroom, Serafina continued. Mom and Dad helped with the down payment, of course. She blew them a kiss, which they received with beaming smiles. When's the housewarming party? Cousin Brian called out. Serafina simpered. Oh, I haven't decided yet. Still getting everything perfect. I smiled to myself, taking a sip of water. Good for her. It was a nice accomplishment, even if she needed our parents' help. My mother suddenly turned to me, her voice unusually loud. Eleanor, you haven't congratulated your sister. All eyes turned to me. Serafina giggled. She's probably just jealous. Not everyone can afford property in this market. My parents exchanged knowing smiles. Then my mother, making sure everyone could hear, said, Well, it'll be a long time before Eleanor can match this achievement. Property ownership is for those with real careers. The table fell silent. everyone watching for my reaction. They expected embarrassment, perhaps tears or stammering excuses. Instead, I laughed. A genuine, spontaneous laugh. Actually, I said, I bought my place 2 years ago. Serafina's smile faltered. A condo, you mean? Or a townhouse? I took another bite of food, chewing slowly, making them wait. No, it's an apartment. 4 bedrooms, corner unit, with a wraparound terrace and lakeside tower. Gasps rippled around the table. Lakeside Tower was the most exclusive address in the city. That's impossible, Serafina sputtered. You're a middle manager. You couldn't afford a broom closet in Lakeside. I dabbed my lips with a napkin. I've been financial director at Sterling for 3 years now. My salary and bonuses are comfortable. The shock on their faces was priceless. My father's fork clattered onto his plate. Financial director? He repeated. Why didn't you tell us? I met his gaze evenly. None of you ever asked. A heavy silence fell over the table. Then my mother's expression suddenly softened. Darling, that's wonderful news. When are you having your housewarming? We'd love to see this apartment. I had my housewarming 2 years ago, I replied calmly. With friends. My mother's smile stiffened. Serafina's face had turned an interesting shade of red. The rest of my relatives were looking at me with newfound interest, as if seeing me for the first time. Uncle Ben raised his glass. Well, congratulations, Eleanor. That's quite an achievement. Others murmured in agreement, while my parents and Serafina sat in stunned silence. As dinner continued, I noticed how everyone suddenly wanted to talk to me, to ask about my job, my life. People who had barely acknowledged me for years were now hanging on my every word. I didn't stay long after my revelation. The atmosphere had become unbearable, my relatives suddenly fawning over me, Serafina sulking in the corner, and my parents oscillating between shock and an unsettling eagerness to reconnect. I made my excuses after dessert, citing an early morning meeting. But it's Sunday tomorrow, my mother protested, following me to the door. Global markets don't sleep, I replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. I did have a call with our Tokyo office, but not until the afternoon. The drive home was strangely liberating. For years, I'd hidden my success from them, partly out of spite, partly because their opinion had ceased to matter long ago. Now that the truth was out, I felt oddly lighter, but also weary. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar comfort. I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto my living room sofa, staring at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The revelation at dinner replayed in my mind, and suddenly everything clicked. The random dinner invitation last week, today's family gathering. It all made sense now. They'd wanted to showcase Serafina's achievement and, by contrast, highlight my supposed failures. They'd gathered the entire family to witness my humiliation. Instead, they'd ended up looking foolish, and now they were scrambling to adjust to this new reality where I wasn't the family disappointment. I was still processing this when my phone began buzzing incessantly. First my father, then my mother, then Serafina. I silenced it and turned on a movie instead. Whatever they wanted to say could wait until morning. When I finally checked my phone the next day, I had 17 missed calls and numerous text messages. Most were variations of call us immediately and we need to talk. I ignored them all and went about my Sunday routine, yoga, brunch with friends, and preparation for the upcoming work week. By evening, the messages had taken on a more urgent tone. Finally, a lengthy text from my mother appeared. Eleanor, we need to speak with you. Your father and I have given this a lot of thought. We've always supported Serafina financially because we thought you were struggling too much to ask for help. Now that we know you're doing so well, we believe as family, we should all support each other. Serafina is having trouble with her mortgage payments. As her successful sister, surely you could help. Call us back immediately. I stared at the message in disbelief, then started laughing so hard, I nearly dropped my phone. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of neglect and favoritism, after attempting to humiliate me in front of the entire family, they now expected me to bail out their golden child. I typed a response. I'm not interested in discussing this. You wanted to embarrass me yesterday, and now you're asking for my help? Please don't contact me again about this matter. I could see the 3 dots appearing and disappearing as my mother started and stopped typing multiple times. Finally, you're being selfish, Eleanor. This is what family does. If you refuse, you're choosing to exclude yourself from this family. Think carefully about this. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine. There was a strange sense of finality to it, a chapter of my life closing. It hurt, but less than I expected. The next morning at work, I immersed myself in quarterly reports and budget meetings. Being financial director of a major firm kept me busy enough to push family drama to the back of my mind. By midweek, I'd almost forgotten about the whole ordeal. Then my assistant buzzed my office. "Miss Williams, there are 2 people in reception insisting on seeing you. They say they're your parents." I froze, my hand hovering over the keyboard. "Tell them I'm in a meeting. They said they'll wait as long as necessary." I sighed, weighing my options. "Give me 5 minutes, then send them in." I quickly tidied my desk and straightened my suit jacket. When my parents walked in, their expressions were a mix of awe and determination as they took in my corner office with its sweeping views. "Nice place," my father said, his eyes lingering on the awards and certificates displayed on my credenza. "Thank you. What can I do for you?" I kept my tone professional, as if they were any other unexpected visitors. My mother stepped forward. "Eleanor, we need to discuss Serafina's situation. She's struggling with her mortgage payments and with your financial." "No," I interrupted firmly. "I'm not paying Serafina's mortgage." My father's face reddened. "Now listen here, young lady. Family helps family. Your mother and I have always what?" I asked quietly. "Always been there for me? Always supported me equally? Always showed up for my important moments?" They exchanged uncomfortable glances. "That's different," my mother said. "Serafina needed more attention. She was more sensitive. And now she needs more money. And suddenly I'm family again?" I shook my head. "You didn't consider me family when you missed my high school graduation, or when you forgot my college commencement, or any of the dozen birthdays and holidays I spent alone." "You're being ridiculous," my father snapped. "We're your parents. Biologically, yes. But you stopped acting like parents years ago." I stood, signaling the end of our meeting. "I have work to do." My mother's expression hardened. "If you turn your back on us now, you'll regret it. Family is all you have in the end. I have friends who've been more family to me than you ever were." I pressed the intercom. "Nancy, please show my visitors out." As they left, my father turned back. "You're making a terrible mistake, Eleanor. This isn't over." The door closed behind them, and I sank back into my chair, emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to cry, but a stronger part felt relieved, as if I'd finally excised something toxic from my life. I threw myself into work over the next few weeks, extending my hours and taking on additional projects. If my colleagues noticed any change in my behavior, they were professional enough not to mention it. I declined invitations for after-work drinks and weekend brunches, preferring the solitude of my apartment or the distraction of long runs along the riverfront. Then, almost a month after the confrontation at my office, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Eleanor, it's Aunt Clara." I relaxed slightly. Aunt Clara had always been the least judgmental of my relatives, though we'd never been particularly close. "Hey, Aunt Clara, what's up?" "I thought you should know what's happening," she said, her voice lowered as if she was afraid of being overheard. "Your parents are telling everyone that you're a terrible person. They're saying you refused to help your sister, even though you're swimming in money, and now they're struggling to make her mortgage payments." I laughed dryly. "Let me guess. Mom's taken on extra shifts, and Dad's working weekends." "Exactly. How did you know?" "Because that's the narrative they want. Poor, hardworking parents sacrificing everything for their struggling daughter, while the selfish, wealthy one refuses to help." Aunt Clara hesitated. "So, is it true about not helping them?" "Yes, it's true. I'm not paying my sister's mortgage. Can I ask why?" I sighed, pacing my living room. "Aunt Clara, do you remember my high school graduation?" "Of course. You were valedictorian. Your speech was lovely. My parents weren't there. They went to Serafina's dance recital instead. They didn't come to my college graduation either, or when I got my first promotion, or my second. They didn't even know I'd been made financial director until I told them at that dinner." I paused, my throat tight. For years, they've treated me like I was invisible, unless they needed something to compare Serafina to. The line was quiet for a moment. "I didn't realize," Aunt Clara finally said, I knew Serafina got more attention, but I didn't know it was that bad. I just thought you should know what they're saying. Thanks for the heads up. I appreciate it. After hanging up, I wandered to my balcony and looked out at the city skyline. Was I being cold-hearted? Maybe. But years of emotional neglect had taught me to protect myself. My parents had made their choice long ago, repeatedly choosing Serafina over me. Now they could live with the consequences. The next morning, I made a decision. Opening my laptop, I booked a 3-week vacation to Europe, something I'd been putting off for too long. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. I'd visit museums, eat at amazing restaurants, and not think about family drama at all. As I finalized the bookings, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. Your sister got fired yesterday. Now she definitely can't make her mortgage payments. If you don't help, she'll lose her apartment. Is that what you want? I stared at the message, shaking my head at the manipulation. I typed back, what I want is for you all to handle your own problems like adults. I'm going on vacation for 3 weeks. Please don't contact me again. I blocked her number before she could respond, then did the same with my father's and Serafina's. It was drastic but necessary. I couldn't move forward if I kept getting pulled back into their drama. The day before my flight, I had lunch with my closest friend Tara. We'd met in college and she'd been my rock through every career milestone and personal crisis. So, you're really cutting them off? She asked as we settled into our favorite bistro. I already have, I replied, spreading my napkin on my lap. I blocked their numbers, and I told security at work not to let them in again. Well, she stirred her iced tea thoughtfully. Are you okay with that? They're still your family. Are they, though? I looked out the window. Family is supposed to support you, care about your achievements, show up when it matters. They've never done any of that. The next day, as I boarded my flight to Paris, one felt lighter than I had in years. The seat next to me was empty, a small luxury on a long flight. I settled in, opened my book, and prepared for takeoff. Just as the flight attendants were closing the doors, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from an unfamiliar address, but the subject line read, "From Dad." I hesitated, then opened it. Eleanor, your mother and I are disappointed in your childish behavior, blocking our numbers, refusing to discuss family matters. This isn't how we raised you. Serafina is struggling, and as her sister, you have a responsibility to help. We've had to dip into our retirement savings to cover her mortgage this month. Is this really the daughter we raised? A selfish woman who puts luxury vacations above family needs? Think about your actions while you're gallivanting around Europe. I deleted the email without responding, then put my phone in airplane mode. The engines roared to life, and soon we were climbing above the clouds. Below me, the city grew smaller and smaller until it was just a speck, and then nothing at all. For 3 weeks, I immersed myself in art, history, and culture. I walked the streets of Paris at dawn, watched the sunset from a Barcelona beach, and ate gelato by the Trevi fountain. I took hundreds of photos, but shared none on social media, where my family might see them. These moments were for me alone. On my last night abroad, sitting at a small cafe in Rome, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The hurt was still there, a dull ache beneath my ribs, but the burning resentment had faded. My parents and Serafina had made their choices, and I had made mine. We were all living with the consequences. When I returned home, tanned and refreshed, my apartment felt even more like a sanctuary. On my kitchen counter was a stack of mail bills, magazines, and a postcard from Tara, who'd gone to Seattle for a conference. Nothing from my family. I unpacked, ordered takeout, and settled onto my balcony with a glass of wine. I was free not just financially, but emotionally. The path ahead was mine alone to choose, unburdened by expectations and old wounds. I raised my glass to the night sky and smiled. Here's to moving forward. Story 2. As I watched the other graduates embrace their families, I stood by myself in my cap and gown. My name is Robin, and I received my degree in computer science from college today. There were no parents present. They were celebrating my twin sister Rachel's graduation in another state. Rather, I looked at their message on my phone once again. Rachel's graduation makes us very proud. When you arrive home, I can't wait to rejoice. Nothing at all regarding my graduation, not even in congrats. I'd always be second best, just to remind you. I got a window seat that was unoccupied as I boarded the train home and saw the campus fade away. I worked hard for 4 years, and my family didn't bother to show up. I shouldn't have had any different expectations. This was how it had always been. I was born on the same day as Rachel, but it was the extent of our commonalities. With our dad's blue eyes and our mom's blonde hair, she was gregarious and endearing. I had dark brown hair and hazel eyes that didn't resemble either parents, and I was quieter and more reserved. I occasionally questioned whether I was adopted, but the newborn photos showed that we were twins, just not identical ones. The trend was evident from the time of our first birthdays. "Happy birthday, Rachel," was usually written on the cake. "Happy birthday, Robin and Rachel." Mom chuckled and remarked, "Oh, we all know it's your birthday too," when I ever asked about it. "We don't have to write it, honey." However, each year they wrote Rachel's name. Reminiscent of our 16th birthday, I gazed out the train window. Rachel purchased an automobile, albeit a modest, pre-owned one. I received a laptop. It's not a horrible present, really. However, I heard my father inform my mother that the computer was being sold. We were able to save more money for Rachel's automobile. I genuinely adore that laptop. I brought it to the school's coding club, where I met individuals who genuinely valued me. The first instructor who seemed to recognize my skill was Mr. Sanders, who was also the club advisor. "You have a gift, Robin." After I spent minutes debugging a senior project, he informed me, "You have a different way of thinking. That's worth it." As the train shook, I closed my eyes and reflected on how I had developed my portfolio for college applications using that laptop. I can vividly picture my parents' reactions when I assured them that I wouldn't want their funds for college. "We have to discuss college. We've saved as much as we can, but we only have enough for one of you," Dad had mentioned at supper one evening. Mom noted that Rachel's social abilities will help her build valuable contacts and that her business degree is highly prominent. I interrupted them. "I received full funding to attend the computer science program at MIT. I'm not in need of your cash." The astonishment on their expressions nearly compensated for years of being ignored. "Nearly. You submitted an application to MIT? When?" Mom asked. "I spent months working on my application," I said. "I received assistance from Mr. Sanders in assembling my portfolio." "Who is Mr. Sanders?" Dad inquired. "My instructor for the past 3 years at the coding club." They exchanged glances, obviously taken aback by my achievements. They had no knowledge of it. I was brought back to the present by the train announcement. It took me 2 more hours to get home. MIT had become more of a home to me than my parents' house ever was, even if it never felt like home. Alex and I first met at MIT at freshman orientation. We both had ideals that were greater than ourselves, were uncomfortable, and were code nerds. By our sophomore year, we were working on our file sharing program whenever we had free time. As we remained up until 3 in the morning coding, Alex would exclaim, "This could be something big," his eyes shining with anticipation. "Perhaps," I would respond, attempting to lower my expectations. I had already learned not to have high expectations. There was a trend to my infrequent calls home. "Hello, sweetheart." Rachel was just voted to the Student Council for Business. Rachel is having a great internship. After she graduates, they could provide her a job offer. At one point, Rachel attended a party at the dean's residence. "What do you do in your free time?" my mother said. "Robin?" With uncommon zeal in my heart, I began to describe our app. "I'm working on this file sharing platform with Alex." "Oh," Mom intervened, talking about pals. "The Johnson family is Rachel's roommate, Johnson Pharmaceuticals, you know." They asked Rachel to spend winter break at their Aspen vacation house. The same thing happened when I went home for the holidays. Our parents were beaming as Rachel held court in the living room, sharing tales of her close-knit classmates and bright future. During my junior year, I sat silently and occasionally nodded when someone recalled me. Everything was different. After many late nights and unsuccessful revisions, Alex and I were able to polish our software. After months of meetings and legal documents, we were discovered by a California tech business. The amount we received for selling it still felt unreal. After taxes, each of them made $2 million. After the purchase completed, I spent 2 weeks sitting in my dorm room, gazing at my phone's banking app. No matter how many times I checked, the number remained the same. $2 million. At the age of 21, I had more money than I could fathom. I kept it to myself, nor my roommate nor my classmates, and most definitely not my relatives. My projects had never before piqued their curiosity. Why would I tell them about this now? In addition, I had no idea how they would respond. If they found out I was wealthy, would they suddenly take an interest in me? I was not interested in learning. I continued to live my life like a typical college student. I wore the same clothing till they were worn out, ate ramen noodles, and griped about textbook fees. The quiet girl in the computer lab was a billionaire, but no one knew it. A year later, I found myself traveling by train to an uninvited party. I would soon see my parents gloating over Rachel's accomplishments, while seldom mentioning mine. Like I usually had, I would pretend it didn't hurt and grin. As we got closer to my stop, the train slowed. After gathering my belongings, I inhaled deeply and got ready to return to the world where I was always an afterthought. I pulled open the front door of the house I grew up in. From the living room came the sound of talk and laughing. The walls were adorned with colorful streamers and a banner congratulating the graduate. All for Rachel. Naturally. "Hi there?" Dropping my luggage in the corridor, I yelled. Mom was setting up a tray of finger sandwiches when she looked over. "Robin, oh, you're present. The visitors will arrive at any moment. Could you assist in setting up these napkins? Mel, give a hug. Mel, congrats. How did your journey go?" I just wanted to ask for assistance with Rachel's celebration. As the doorbell rang, I arranged napkins in silence. Relatives, friends, neighbors, and family poured in with cards and presents for Rachel. When introduced, I stood in the corner and smiled nicely, but I was largely invisible. This is exciting, right? Rachel received business honors at graduation. Next door, Miss S. Peterson gushed to my mother. "We are quite proud." Mom smiled. When Aunt Judy saw me, she came up and gave me a big embrace. "It's great to see you, Robin. How did your graduation go?" I apologized that we were unable to attend. I replied that was all right. I'm glad someone did recall. Judy then surveyed the decor. She furrowed her brow. "Are we just commemorating Rachel's graduation today, I wonder? How about Robin?" Conversations around them slowed. Mom's cheeks turned red. "We're celebrating both of our daughters, of course," she responded hastily. "We haven't had time to put my name on any of the decorations because Robin just got here." Despite the knot in my gut, I advised speaking in a light tone. Dad cleared his throat. "Shall we all have supper together? The meal is cooling down." Awkwardly, everyone filed to the dinner table. One of Rachel's high school pals, who didn't recall ever meeting me, and my cousin Tyler ended up at odds over me. Dad raised his glass and said, "Before we eat, to our wonderful girls, I would like to make a toast." My heartbeat accelerated. Perhaps they would finally recognize my degree. To Rachel, Dad went on to graduate from the business program with honors. "Your mother and I are so proud of your perseverance and hard work." Rachel grinned as she took in the compliment. "Additionally, we offer a unique present to aid you on your travels." As she handed Rachel an envelope, Mom continued, "We are providing $100,000 to assist you in launching your own company." Rachel started crying as soon as she opened the package. "God, oh God, thank you. This is incredible. I'm going to achieve great success. I'm going to be wealthy. I swear." Everyone cheered. I also gave a clap. I'm curious what they would think of me. To Robin, too. Dad turned to face me and said, he extracted a wrapped item from beneath the table. "Well done on finishing your computer studies." I picked up the package and opened it. "How to Become a Millionaire. A Step-by-Step Guide" was the title of the book. Mom remarked enthusiastically, "We thought this would help you on your path." It received excellent internet reviews. As Rachel saw Aunt Judy's critical expression, she snorted and immediately masked it with a cough. One day Robin will undoubtedly be wealthy as well. When I got my business off the ground, she patted my arm and said that I might be able to provide you some advice. I gazed at the book with a perplexing mix of laughter and pain. If only they were aware. "Thank you," I was able to express my gratitude. As the dinner went on, Rachel's future ambitions, business ideas, contacts, and potential were the main topics of discussion. I excused myself early, saying I was tired from the journey, and went upstairs to my old bedroom. Since high school, my childhood room hasn't altered much. On the walls are posters of it pioneers. Bookshelves stocked with science fiction books and programming instructions. The desk where I had coded for hours on end. while Rachel went downstairs to games and parties. I flipped the book, How to Become a Millionaire, over in my hands while I sat on my bed. The irony was nearly flawless. The real estate agent I'd been in touch with before to graduation buzzed my phone with a text. I've located the ideal apartment that meets your needs. Available for viewing at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I grinned as I imagined my parents' expressions. If they were aware that I was going to purchase an apartment outright, no mortgage, only mine, no roommates. My thoughts were interrupted by a gentle tap on my door. Enter. I yelled out to Judy, and she stuck her head in. I wanted to see how you were doing. Down there, that was unpleasant? I gave a shrug. I'm accustomed to it. She sat on the bed next to me. You don't need to be. You received your MIT degree. For heaven's sake, that's amazing. Regards, Aunt Judy. Are you looking for a job? She inquired. Yes, in fact. Last month, I signed a deal with Nexus Tech. Judy's eyes widened as she heard that I start in 2 weeks. Nexus Technology? It's a big business. Robin. That's fantastic. I grinned, experiencing a unique sense of pride. The pay is also good. I'll be all right. I would say it's better than fine. Is your family aware? I gave a head shake. They haven't inquired. Aunt Judy let out a sigh. Your parents' obsession with Rachel has always baffled me. Each of you is unique in your own way. I reassured myself by opening my laptop and logging into my bank account after she departed. There it was, $2 million more than my parents had ever saved. More than Rachel had received to launch her company. I felt both a weird, illicit exhilaration and a knot in my gut at the idea of sharing this information. How would their faces appear? Would they see me at last? I shut off my laptop and gazed up at the ceiling, envisioning what may be there. I could remain mute, Robin, and remain unseen, where I could demonstrate to them the accomplishments of their underappreciated daughter. I got up early the following morning and packed my bag. I had decided in the middle of the night. I had to quit keeping my accomplishments a secret. For my own closure, not their acceptance. I opened my laptop and got out the book, How to Become a Millionaire. I took a screenshot of my $2 million amount after logging into my bank account and printed it. I went downstairs after gently tucking the printout inside the book. The breakfast table was already occupied by my family. Rachel told her parents that she intended to rent office space and start a boutique marketing agency for small businesses. She was saying, of course, as I walked in with something amazing to show clients. Downtown, maybe. Good morning. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, I remarked, "Oh, good morning, Robin," Mom said. "If you want some toast, it's available." I took a seat at the table. In fact, I wanted to inform you that I will be departing today. They were drawn to that. In a way, Dad put his newspaper down a little. Already. You arrived just now. I need to take care of certain things, I said. Back in Cambridge, I discovered a flat. Mom seemed perplexed. However, you recently received your degree. How is an apartment affordable? I mentioned that I had a job lined up. Before I graduated, I signed a contract with Nexus Tech. That software firm? Dad questioned in a startled tone. Good for you then. You will still require roommates though. Apartments are always shared at start. Rachel gave a knowing nod. You'll be sharing a small space with about 5 other programmers. It's just getting started that way. I tried not to smile as I took a drink of my coffee. I'll be living alone, actually. It has 2 bedrooms, an excellent internet connection, and an office. Mom scowled. Be sensible, Robin. Particularly in Cambridge, entry-level positions don't pay enough for that type of setting. Additionally, you should save for emergencies, Rachel emphasized. That's business. 101. I put my coffee cup down. While we're on the subject of business, I wanted to express my gratitude for the book I put on the table, How to Become a Millionaire, but I think you ought to see inside. Something intriguing was contained therein. The book was taken up and opened by Dad. My bank account's printed screenshot dropped on the table. Rachel briefly craned her neck to see as Mom bent over to have a look. No one said anything. Their gaze shifted from my face to the page. What is this? At last, Dad questioned in a very quiet voice. Just my bank account, I said. $2 million? Rachel almost let out a cry. Could this be a joke? Not a joke. Trying to look calmer than I actually felt, I took another drink of coffee. Do you recall the app someone attempted to introduce you to last year? That one you didn't want to hear about? I sold it to a tech business along with my classmate Alex. Her mother put her hand to her throat. After taxes, you earned $2 million from an app? Yes, I did confirm. About a year ago, we finalized the transaction. Dad was left speechless after a year. You have been in possession of this money for a year without informing us. I looked him in the eyes. You may have known if you'd been at all interested in my life, Rachel. Something else was emerging from shock. A cunning expression I remembered from my youth. The one she employed while determining how to make a situation work in her favor. She remarked, "That's fantastic, Robin," in an unexpectedly friendly and animated tone. "We ought to join you in celebrating your achievement. I've always known you were intelligent. This is a cause for celebration," Mom replied as she reached across the table for my hand. "Robin, you have our utmost admiration." When she spoke the endearment, it sounded strange. "Do you feel proud of my finances or myself?" Quietly, I asked. There was an awkward quiet across the table. "That's unfair, Robin." "At last," Mom said. "We're proud of you, of course." "That's good to hear," I said, getting to my feet. I should leave. In an hour, my train departs. Mom sprang to her feet, appearing suddenly desperate. "Please remain, Robin. We can also throw a formal graduation party for you. We will purchase another cake. Bring others over. Thank you for the offer, but I have to leave." I made my way to the door. "Hold on, Robin. Dad gave a call. Let us take you to the station, at least." I said, "I've already called a car. It should arrive at any moment." I followed Rachel to the door. She lowered her voice. "You can't just drop a bomb like this and go. Mom and Dad borrowed money from my company. Cash. They're depending on me to be successful, you know." I stopped at the entrance. I was unaware of that. I acknowledged, but they made that decision. Rachel remarked, "We're family. Don't you think you should lend a hand if you have all this money?" A car's horn rang outside before I could respond. I had a ride. Farewell. As I opened the door, I said, "When I'm ready, I'll get in contact." I saw Rachel and my dad waiting in the doorway as the vehicle sped away. They expressed a combination of surprise, perplexity, and most importantly, calculus. My phone instantly began to vibrate with calls and texts from all three of them. However, I turned it off. Compared to the train travel to my parents' place, the one returning to Cambridge was quieter. This time, my thoughts was muddled by male recollections. Just possibilities. I was wealthy, had a bright future, and was free. My family's approval was something I no longer had and wasn't sure I wanted. I met the realtor at the hotel before heading to the flat. It was flawless, roomy, contemporary, with lots of windows and quick internet. That afternoon, I signed the paperwork. The realtor handed me the keys and said, "Congratulations, Miss Wells. You own it all." I eventually checked my phone as I was getting comfortable in my hotel room that evening. Dozens of text messages and 27 missed calls all had variations on the same subject. "We must speak. Give us a call back, please. We're quite pleased with you. Family members ought to assist. Family." I switched off my phone and gazed at the city lights outside the window. I was in charge of the plot for once, and tomorrow would be the first day of my new existence. It took me a week before I finally picked up one of my mom's calls. I've been occupied with getting settled in my new apartment, scheduling furniture delivery, and getting ready for my Nexus Tech job. But for the most part, I've been content with the quiet of not having to defend myself to others. When I picked up, Mom said, "Thank God, Robin. We've been somewhat anxious." "I'm all right," I said, just preoccupied with the MILF. With that pragmatic tone in her voice, she stated, "We need to talk." I was too familiar. "I wanted to talk to you about something important with your father. Is it possible that you will return home this weekend?" "I am unable to. I'm still unpacking before my new work starts on Monday. Then perhaps we might pay you a visit." There was no mistaking the enthusiasm in her voice. "Not this weekend." I spoke aggressively. "What were you hoping to talk about?" One more pause. "It has to do with Rachel's company debt. We were considering asking you to assist us pay off the debt because you had such a nice fortune. After all, family should help family." It was there, the true cause of all those anxious texts and calls. They are more interested in what my money could accomplish for them than in me. "No," I answered plainly. "No." She sounded truly shocked, as though she hadn't considered the prospect of rejection. "I will not provide you with funds to settle Rachel's company loan. I'm not in charge of it. We are family, though." She raised her voice. "What specifically have you done for me, Mother, after everything we've done for you?" Quietly, I asked. "My college education was funded by my scholarship. I earned spending money by working summer jobs. Without your or your father's help, I developed my profession and my app." Then there was silence between us. I'm amazed at how self-centered you can get. I am not being self-centered. I'm establishing limits. I inhaled deeply. I suppose I need to go away from all of you for a while. When I'm ready to speak again, I'll give you a call. Hold on, Robin. Over the following few days, I discontinued the call. My relatives kept sending me texts. Dad took a different tack, praising my spirit of entrepreneurship and proposing that we speak about business sometime. Rachel alternated between abruptly recalling childhood memories and guilt trips. She had lied, and I knew it. I needed time to concentrate on my fresh start, so I blocked their calls for a week. It was a thrilling first day at Nexus Tech. The corporate culture fulfilled all of my expectations. Innovative, demanding, and courteous. My boss was delighted by my portfolio, and I received a warm welcome from my team. "You created a fantastic file sharing program. During our initial one-on-one encounter," she informed me, we recruited you for that reason. For the first time in my life, we had high expectations. Instead of being viewed as the less fascinating twin or compared to others, I felt that my qualities were actually appreciated. At work, I immediately made pals. We began gathering at my place on Friday nights to play video games, get pizza, and talk about coding issues. These individuals valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide. "Your parents are telling everyone you're rich, but refusing to help family," Judy stated without preface when she contacted me 4 months into my new existence. "I believe you ought to be aware." I let out a sigh. That's what I thought they may do. She went on to say that Rachel's business isn't doing well. It turns out that the majority of small businesses choose to perform the majority of their marketing online rather than pay high fees. "Unfortunately," I said, "do not be concerned." Judy told me that I've been correcting the family's records. The majority of us recall how they have consistently handled you. It's okay to keep your distance from others. Regards, Aunt Judy. Her voice then became more cheerful. "Tell me about your recent employment. Has it fulfilled all of your expectations?" We spent an hour discussing my new acquaintances, my place, and my job. She didn't ask for anything or bring up my money at all. After we ended the call, I felt lighter. My mother phoned me again, 9 months after I told her at breakfast. I responded without hesitation this time. I wanted to know if she had changed. "Robin," she said quietly, "how are you?" "I'm a good mother. What's going on there?" "Last week, Rachel's business folded." She sighed. "She is currently searching for a regular employment." "That's unfortunate to hear." "It's tough, but your father and I are making the loan payments." She hesitated. "I am not phoning to request money. I just wanted to let you know that I've been considering how we've handled you in contrast to Rachel." I remained silent and waited. "You showed us that bank statement, and I don't think I realized how much we favored her," she said. "The realization that you had done so much without our knowledge was startling. Mom, you ought to have noticed me sooner rather than later." "I understand," she muttered. "I apologize." I was taken by surprise by the apology. Although it wasn't enough, it was something to make up for years of being ignored. I said, "Thank you for saying that. Is there any chance we could come? Have you seen your new location?" No demands regarding the loan or anything else, only to visit you. Maybe in a few more months, I thought. "I am still settling in." She responded, "We'll wait until you're ready," and Robin agreed. "I genuinely admire your accomplishments." I watched the sunset over Cambridge from my balcony after we hung up. Although I wasn't yet prepared to make a complete reconciliation with my family, I finally recognized the potential for a better connection down the road. One founded not on need for money but on true respect. My coworker Zoe texted me. Then my phone rang. "Supper as a team at 7 I returned the text with a smile. Of course. I was thankful for the journey that had brought me here. As I prepared to meet my friends, the neglected sibling had grown into a prosperous software engineer with a lovely home and deep connections. My parents, who had always ignored me, no longer needed to validate me. Story 3. My phone rang when I was having a nice coffee break at the little cafe opposite from my office building. I nearly choked on my cappuccino as Mom's name appeared on the screen. It wasn't odd that we hadn't spoken for months. We had never been intimate. Kelly. Hi, sweetheart. Her tone sounded abnormally soft. I anxiously stirred my coffee and murmured, "Hello, Mom. This is not what was intended. I just wanted to see how things are going for you since the divorce." It must have been challenging. I let out a sigh as the well-known pain in my chest returned. I had just been divorced from Mark for 2 weeks after discovering him having an affair with his coworker. The recollection still hurt. Yes, I acknowledge that it has been difficult. However, I'm getting by. I got to keep the house at least. I didn't argue with Mark about it. His guilt, I believe, favored me. Before I could say anything further, Mom said, "Listen, you are sorely missed by your father and myself. This Saturday, how about we have supper together? We haven't had a family lunch in far too long." The invitation was unexpected. I had been married to Mark for 5 years. We were invited over by my folks, perhaps twice. Conversation should always be brief and superficial. I agreed. I'm becoming overcome with curiosity. I hung up and sat there, perplexed. Warm and friendly had never been my parents' style. My older sister Lisa had always received consecutive as a youngster, making her the golden child. The person who got married immediately following college. The one who produced grandkids for them. I was simply the afterthought, Kelly. Saturday came around fast. I saw that my parents' little ranch-style house required new paint when I parked into their driveway. I was about to knock when Dad answered the door. He pulled me into an uncomfortable hug and shouted, "Kelly, come in, with strange eagerness. Mom came out of the kitchen, using her apron to wipe her hands. "You're exactly on schedule. We're almost done with dinner." The fine china, which they always saved for Christmas and Thanksgiving, was on the table. As we ate, there was undoubtedly a problem. They asked me a ton of questions. "How is the marketing firm's job going then?" Dad inquired. "All right. Next month, I'm hoping to get promoted." As I chopped into my chicken, I remarked, "What do you currently do with your leisure time?" Mom added, "Do you have any new interests?" I gave a shrug. Not at all. Simply concentrated on surviving each day. I suffered greatly as a result of the divorce. Mom patted my hand empathetically and murmured, "Of course, dear. You're young, though. You'll recover." After exchanging looks, Dad cleared his throat. "What plans do you have for the house, then?" It was there. The true motive behind the invitation to supper. It's going to be my home. Flatly, I replied. "Next year, I intend to refurbish, after I have some money saved up." Mom's eyes glowed. "Remodeling, how appropriate. You ought to bring that up." I put my fork down. "What are you saying?" Dad started to lean forward. "I have made the decision to fully remodel our home with your mother. The electrical wiring is no longer up to code, and the plumbing has to be updated." I warily answered, "That's good. You should do some work on your residence. The problem is that we need a place to stay while the renovations are being done," Mom added. Months may pass. When I recognized where this was going, my gut grew tight. Dad also mentioned that renting would be a huge waste of money, because Lisa's apartment is already packed with the kids. Mom gripped my hand as she reached across the table. "We hoped you would allow us to remain at your home. It's enormous, and you have plenty of room to yourself." I wanted to refuse right away. My skin crawled at the idea of my parents encroaching on my personal space. We have never had a good relationship, and I had learned to appreciate my freedom after years of feeling inferior to Lisa. But I paused when I saw their eager expressions. Perhaps this is an opportunity to finally improve your connection with them. My home was also roomy, a spacious colonial with 4 bedrooms. I answered hesitantly. "I suppose that would be okay." "You would have to move in when?" Mom gladly recommended next week. "On Monday, the contractors will begin work." Dad responded, "We'd be so appreciative, Kelly. It would be really beneficial to us." I nodded against my better judgment. "Okay. Until your renovations are finished, you are welcome to remain with me." I questioned whether I had misunderstood their intentions, because the relief and delight on their expressions appeared sincere. Perhaps they truly wanted to get back in touch, and our living situation would allow us to do so. "I'm grateful, honey," Mom murmured, a little tear in her eye. "For us, this is really important." My parents brought a number of luggage to my house a week later. Mom grabbed a bag full of her favorite cookware, and Dad carried a box of personal belongings. "Greetings." Holding the door open, I said, "I got the upstairs guest room ready for you two. Kelly, you are really nice." As she went by, Mom kissed my cheek. As I assisted them in settling in, we agreed not to cause any trouble. My instinct told me that I would regret this choice, but I forced those feelings to the back of my mind. How awful might it be? It was brief, ultimately. Living with my parents for the first several weeks went remarkably well. We only interacted on the weekends and in the evenings, because I went for work every morning at 8 and didn't get back until after 6. When I went home, I was shocked to see that my mother had prepared dinner, something I hadn't done since I was a kid. "How did your day at work go?" As I took off my shoes and put up my coat, she would inquire. Busy but effective. Taking a seat at the kitchen table, I would respond. Dad always waved casually as I walked by while he watched the news in the living room. They would leave early on the weekends to see how the renovations were going at their house, which allowed me to relax and keep up some semblance of my regular schedule. The bathroom has been completely gutted, according to the contractor. When they got back one Sunday night, Dad reported, "Water damage was discovered and has to be fixed. It seems like it will take longer than anticipated." I made a remark while attempting to hide my worry. Mom gave a nod. They always do. "However, we are quite appreciative of having a more pleasant place to reside." I gave a stiff smile. I'm glad to assist. However, the harmonious cohabitation was short-lived. When I was cleaning the kitchen on a Saturday morning, I switched on some Beethoven, which was the first indication that anything was off. Mom's face was pinched when she appeared in the doorway. "Would you mind declining that, Kelly? Or even better, off. A horrible migraine is starting to strike." I reached for the speaker and responded, "Oh, sure. I simply listen to classical music as I clean." "You can do anything you want when you live alone," she answered. "However, you must show consideration when you have visitors." To avoid bringing up the fact that they weren't really guests, I bit my tongue. When they requested to remain at my house, I kindly granted their request. Rather, I quietly completed the cleaning. The next problem started on a Tuesday night when my friend Jan came in with a bottle of wine and takeout. As we sat down with our dinner on the couch, I remarked, "This is so nice. I've been craving a night out with the gals." Dad cleared his throat from the doorway as we were halfway through our second glass of wine. "It is almost 9 o'clock, Kelly." Pointily, he said. "Before going to bed, your mother and I are attempting to unwind." Jen lifted her eyebrows in my direction. I smiled apologetically at her. "I'm sorry, Father. We'll keep it low." Mom came up to me in the kitchen after Jen had left. "We don't mean to be tough, honey, but it's annoying to have guests after 6 o'clock. We need our quiet time because we're becoming elderly." I said, "I understand, but I didn't. I'll let my buddies know that they shouldn't visit for a time." The limitations kept piling up. The groceries I purchased caused them to grumble. Why spend money on organic? Both of them experienced back discomfort due to the firmness of their mattress. And I even had trouble loading the dishwasher. You don't arrange the plates that way. I felt increasingly alienated in my own house every day. If my residence wasn't up to their standards, I wanted to yell that they should live somewhere else. However, I said nothing. This was a short-term agreement. All I had to do was bear it a bit longer. Maya, my 7-year-old niece, yelled at me when she saw me, and 2 kids were running through my living room when I got home one day. Jake, her 5-year-old brother, kept going around the coffee table in circles. I glanced around, perplexed. "Where is your mother?" "With Grandma in the kitchen," Maya answered, then hurried away once again. Totally unconcerned by the mayhem coming from the other room, I discovered Lisa and my mother conversing over coffee. "Hey sis," remarked Lisa nonchalantly, "I hope it's okay with you that we stopped by." "Obviously not." I said a falsehood. I just didn't anticipate company. Mom dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "You wouldn't mind," I assured Lisa. "There is plenty of room for the youngsters to play in your house." In contrast to their little abode, what began as a one-time visit soon turned into a regular one. My parents soon began to pick up Jake and Maya from school and bring them to my house so Lisa could pick them up after work, which was sometimes as late as 9 or 10 o'clock at night. My living room would be turned into a playground when I got home, fatigued and in need of some solitude. There are toys all over the place. Both my parents' lack of attempt to regulate their grandchildren's conduct and the sticky fingerprints on my furnishings. They are simply being children, When I suggested that they may tone it down, Mom would say, youngsters must express themselves. Weekends became terrible. Lisa would spend whole days at my place with her husband Tom and the children, feeling like an unwanted visitor in my own home. I would withdraw to my bedroom while the grown-ups conversed and the kids played amok. I went over to my folks in the living room one evening after Lisa had finally taken her kids home. You like visiting the kids. I know that. I started off cautiously, but I require some relaxation after work. Perhaps they could come less frequently. Dad frowned as he looked up from his newspaper. Kelly, they're family. Families should always be accepted. I explained that I wasn't suggesting they weren't welcome. All I'm requesting is some boundaries. Mom and Dad looked at each other. Nothing changed. But we will see what we can do. If anything, I started to dread the daily commute home as the number of visits rose. I comforted myself by thinking that things will return to normal when my parents' refurbishment was finished. The Saturday that altered everything then arrived. Mom made the announcement that she would be having a family supper at my house. We all gathered around my dining table when Lisa, Tom, and the children arrived at 5 o'clock. I observed Lisa and my parents making meaningful eye contact throughout the meal. There was a sense of tension in the air, as if everyone knew something I didn't. Dad cleared his throat as we finished dessert. We need to talk to you more seriously, Kelly. With a knot in my gut, I put down my fork. Lisa and her family are the focus. Mom started. They are now having some financial issues. Their apartment's rent keeps going up. They can no longer sustain it. I fervently hoped I was mistaken, but I could see where this was going. Mom patted my hand and said, we were thinking. Maybe perhaps Lisa and her family might live in temporarily while they recover because you have so much room. I glanced at my sister and Dad, my jaw hanging wide. I glanced at Lisa, who was giving me what I thought was a look of helplessness and desperation. She used that identical gaze to obtain what she wanted throughout our entire upbringing. No, I responded bluntly. Not at all. There was silence at the table. As though my rejection had come as a complete surprise, 4 sets of eyes gazed at me in shock. It was Lisa who broke the stillness first. No, what do you mean? She raised her voice abruptly. Kelly, you live here alone. For one person, this house is just too large. It's my home. My fury increasing, I answered. Who lives there is up to me. We are family, though, Mom murmured, her shocked eyes wide. We help one another. I have stood by you, I retorted. For weeks, I've allowed you and your father to remain here for free. I've given permission for Maya and Jake to attend daycare at my residence. I tolerated my life being totally upended. Mom's face twisted into a look of wounded pride as her hand sprang to her chest. I never imagined my own kid would act so disrespectfully toward our living arrangement. That's not my purpose. I spoke, attempting to maintain a steady tone. All I'm doing is setting a limit. Limits? Lisa laughed. That's just self-serving rhetoric. You live here by yourself and have all the room. We have 2 growing children and are crowded into a 2-bedroom apartment. Perhaps you need to have considered that before having children that you couldn't afford. Lisa gasped as I snapped. You dare! Not everyone can have a large empty house and be a divorced parent without children. I clenched my teeth and muttered, I earned this house. I put a lot of effort into my job. I made wise decisions. Above all, it belongs to me. Who lives there is up to me. That's it then? Dad inquired. You refuse to assist your own sister when she is in need. Each of their faces caught my attention. The entitlement, the judgment, the disillusionment. I've been attempting to get their acceptance and be seen as valued as Lisa for years. However, I now understood that I didn't require their consent. I needed to feel at ease. That's all. I have verified that Lisa and her family will not be relocating. This is the end of the conversation. After getting up, I went to my bedroom and shut the door firmly behind me. The muted noises of their ongoing talk were audible to me, undoubtedly analyzing my brutality and selfishness. I didn't give a damn. I felt like I had defended myself for the first time in weeks. I walked to a quiet residence early the following morning. Neither of my parents recognized me when I walked to the kitchen. Mom, who had been preparing my breakfast ever since they moved in, was drinking coffee and reading a magazine with a critical eye. Dad had his crossword problem occupied. Good morning. I tried to be quiet. All right, if they desired to behave like kids, they made that decision. After preparing my own breakfast, I left for work. When I came back that night, there was no meal. Awaiting, For days, the pattern persisted. Like ghosts, my parents wandered around the house talking to each other but never to me. The one bright spot in the whole thing was that Lisa stopped bringing the kids around. I was really beginning to appreciate the quiet after a week of this silent treatment. They had made a grave calculation error if this was their intended penalty. After Mark moved out, I lived alone for weeks and had learned to like the privacy. As usual, I departed for work on Friday morning. I arrived to the office later than expected because of a hectic day filled with back-to-back meetings. Around 7:30 p.m., I finally pulled into my driveway and was excited for a peaceful evening with a glass of wine and perhaps a movie. When I tried to turn the front door lock using my key, it refused to turn. I tried again, thinking I had misplaced my keys. Nothing. What on earth? I murmured, making a third attempt before I realized they had replaced the locks. I loudly knocked after ringing the doorbell. A minute later, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face through the side window. The security chain pulled taut as she barely opened the door. As though I were a complete stranger, she responded, "Yes." "What's happening, Mom? My key is broken." "Oh," she remarked nonchalantly. "Today we got our locks replaced." My mouth fell open. "Without notifying me, you changed the locks on my house?" Behind her, Dad showed up. "We have been considering, Kelly. You don't need this much room. Lisa's family is also having difficulties. Living here makes more sense for them." "Are you crazy?" I spluttered. "You cannot simply occupy my home. We will not take over." Mom was right. Simply said, "We're using the area more effectively. Next month, Lisa and her family will move in." I was astounded by their boldness as I stood there. "Now let me in. This is against the law." Dad brushed it off as a family issue. "You can locate another place to live because you have a lot of money." "You honestly believe I won't make a police call?" I swore. Mom gave me a patronizing grin. "You wouldn't report your own parents to the police?" They genuinely thought I would simply roll over and allow them to take my house. The property I had been making mortgage payments on for years. The house I had battled for during the divorce. "I'll be staying at a hotel for the night." Even though I was furious, I spoke in an uncanny, calm tone. "When I've had time to reflect, we can talk about this tomorrow." Mom's face lit up with relief. "Kelly, you made a really mature choice. I knew you would change your mind." I heard the door of my car close as I made my way back there. They believed they had triumphed. They believed I was surrendering. They were completely mistaken. I drove to the closest hotel, checked in, and contacted my divorce attorney, James Brennan, right away. While I waited for his reply, I left an urgent message on his voicemail, outlining the circumstances. I alternated between incredulity and rage as I paced the hotel room. How could I have been harmed by my own parents? Were they truly under the impression that they could get away with it? I was about to contact the cops straight when my phone rang. "It's James, Kelly. I received your message. Are you all right?" "Not at all. I acknowledged that my parents had unlawfully occupied my home. They won't allow me in after changing the locks while I was at work. That is completely against the law. No matter how long they have been living with you, James affirmed that they have no right to do that. It's quite acceptable for you to contact the police." Feeling justified, I responded, "That's what I thought. However, I was concerned that I was exaggerating. He told me you weren't. Depending on your state's laws, this is both criminal trespass and probably burglary. Make a police call. Make a report. I'm also available if you require legal representation later on." With a weird mixture of resolve and melancholy, I thanked him and hung up. Although I never thought I would have to call the police to mediate a conflict with my own family, they had gone too far. I saw that it was 9 p.m. when I looked at the clock. It was late enough that my parents would probably be getting comfortable for the evening and maybe even congratulating themselves on their ingenious scheme. It's the ideal time for a wake-up call. I went directly to the police station by car. When I got to the front desk, the night shift officer glanced up. "I have to report an unlawful property seizure," I said. "My house's locks have been changed, and my parents won't let me in." With a nod, the officer motioned me to take a seat. "I'll require identity and evidence of ownership." I unlocked my phone to view the digital versions of my mortgage and deed paperwork and took out my driver's license. I described everything, including how I had let my parents remain while they were renovating and how they had changed the locks while I was at work and denied me access. I gave the cops my phone number so they could contact me when I gave my formal statement. The Hampton Inn on 5th Street is where I'll be staying. I informed them that while I returned to the hotel and made an effort to unwind, I was unable to fall asleep. I was reliving the day's events. The hotel phone rang at midnight. "This is Officer Daniels from the police department, Miss Richards. I'm phoning to inquire about the state of your home." I instantly sat up. "Indeed. What took place?" "Your parents had to be detained, ma'am. When we informed them that they were occupying your property unlawfully, they fought our officers and used derogatory language. They're in the police station right now." In spite of everything, I felt sick. "Are they incarcerated in holding cells?" "Indeed. When is the best time for you to visit the station?" I looked at the time. It was beyond midnight already. "I can arrive first thing in the morning." My cell phone started ringing as soon as I hung up, with my sister and dad making repeated calls. I just switched off my phone and didn't answer any of the calls. I wanted room to think without being influenced by others. When I put my phone back on the next morning, I was inundated with alerts, including hundreds of missed calls and texts from Lisa and my parents. I looked at some of the messages. "How could you harm your own parents in this way? You were reared by us. Because of you, Mom is wailing in a jail. You're ruthless and harsh. Now retract your comment. Family supports family. You're not my sister anymore." I hung up the phone, refusing to be influenced by their guilt-tripping techniques. My parents had spent all night at the police station, and were still there when I got there. They seemed awful, unkempt, and worn out. Mom's eyes were swollen and red from crying, and when she saw me, she began to cry again. For a minute, Dad just had a disappointed and angry expression. I felt pity threatening to overwhelm me. After all, these were my parents. Then I recalled how blatantly they had intended to rob my home. Hell is entitled. Just because they desired it, they didn't steal what was rightfully mine. I repressed my sympathy and remained steadfast. I'm prepared to take back my statement, but only with one restriction. I looked straight at my parents when I informed the policeman. They must leave my residence right away after gathering their belongings. Today. "Yeah, all right," Dad responded hastily, his fury giving way to desperation. "Kelly, you can do whatever you want." Mom frantically nodded while crying. "We're going now. Please just remove the charges. They were freed after the police fined them for defying and disrespecting authorities." They gladly complied with my instruction that they vacate right away. At the parking lot of the station. When Lisa saw her parents come out, she was waiting and pacing nervously next to her car. She hurried over to assist them. With a look of utter malice in her eyes, she placed them in her car and glared at me. They then took off in the direction of my residence. To make sure they went there, I drove after them. My folks started packing as soon as they got to my place. In their garage, they worked swiftly and quietly as they loaded everything into their car. They were prepared to go within an hour. They didn't say goodbye to me before they drove off. When they pulled out of the driveway, they didn't even look at me. I got all the locks replaced as soon as they left by calling a locksmith. I made the clear decision that I would never again allow anyone other than my family to enter my house. My mother sent me a text message a few days later. "You are no longer a part of this family in my eyes. We no longer wish to contact with you." I exhaled a sigh of relief as I gazed at the message. It was not a sense of regret or grief. It was liberty. I also did not want to speak to them. Their incessant insistence, their partiality for Lisa, and their feeling of right to my house and my life. At last, I was free of everything. I now live alone and peacefully at my home. My life is my own, free from their demands and criticism. I don't talk to my sister or my parents, and to be honest, it has made my life so much more tranquil. I occasionally question whether I should feel bad about how things turned out, but then I remind myself that I didn't cause this circumstance. I just refuse to allow myself to be exploited and controlled. I feel totally at peace for the first time in years, and my house is genuinely mine again.